programs that I developed because we were trying to get all the kids to come in for summer programs, and this is a great summer program that I'm going to share with you, is on having them create their own graphic novel, and doing it a little bit different, as opposed to having them just sit down and draw a graphic novel. This one, what I'll say is what I really like about it is it teaches character development, plotting, story pacing, and dialogue, so they can transfer all of those things into writing. I'm not going to say real stories, because graphic novels are real stories, and they are hard to write. They are not easy to write. But you can transfer all of that into writing longer stories. So my graphic novel program that I created for Plastics Arts that I've also run at Richmond Public Library is ideal for grades 4 to 6. You can also do it for older grades, and if you're doing it with older grades, you can tend to do more. But I find the kids who are in grades 4 to 6 just get a lot out of it. They have a lot of fun with it. I'm going to show you a program called Comic Life, and I'm going to stop clapping because I'm realizing that there's a camera there, and that's probably just going to sound weird. And then I'll do it again. So Comic Life is a program for creating comics, and it's very cheap. It's not very expensive. You can buy a copy of it for $40 if you get it for the laptop or the desktop, or you can get, if you have iPads that you have for your patrons, you can also get it for the iPad, and I think actually that version of it starts off free. You also need a camera. If you have a green screen, it's great. You don't need to have a green screen. When I show you that part of the program, all you actually need is a sheet that is one color, and that's it. And handouts of graphic novel panels, which actually I sent to Dana to give you an example of that, and pencils and pencil crayons. And then that's pretty much all you need for the program, except for one other thing that I'll tell you about later. So this is Comic Life. Comic Life is a really versatile program for basically dragging and dropping any kind of comic that you want to create. It has ready-made panels, it has ready-made speech bubbles, and you can pretty much do anything that you want with it. What I really like about it is, I'm going to move over here, if you see over here, this little folder there, you can also import pictures. So the way that I did this with my students was I had them work individually first, before showing them the program, before telling them what we were going to do. I had them work individually to create their comic book character. And their comic book character, of course, I introduced as having them draw several times what they were going to be, who they wanted to create, and then, that's what I want to show you. And then I had them bring in costumes. This is a great program to do during Halloween because they all have a costume. If you have them bring in their own costume and work individually, what you're going to wind up having when you put them into groups are the weirdest group of superheroes ever. Like, if you've seen the movie trailer for Suicide Squad or read the comic book, or even Guardians of the Galaxy, this is better because what they will come up with will be bizarre. This was a Stormtrooper helmet that one of my students, and unfortunately, I can't show you pictures of what my students did because it's against the law and this is being filmed. So this was a Stormtrooper helmet that one of my students had brought in. Another kid brought in a Spider-Man costume. There was a fairy princess and a unicorn. That was the best comic ever, I have to tell you. So have them bring in costumes, and then, there was supposed to be a character sheet there. So we're going to pretend there's a character sheet there. The character sheet is basically just a blank piece of paper where they draw their character, how they think that they would look, and then they write down whatever superpowers they're going to have. So, for example, if I decided that I was going to be Batman, and I would draw my version of Batman, that would be a stick figure, basically. And you tell them that that's okay. If that's what they're going to draw as a stick figure, there's nothing wrong with that. Jeff Kinney made stick figures, very, very cool. And then they write down whatever superpower that they'll have. And I might say, even though I'm Batman, I'm going to have X-ray vision. I don't know why I went there. So then you have them learn dialogue, because dialogue between the characters is going to be very important. And at that point, I usually pair them up into groups of 2. So now they've gone from working individually into working into pairs. And then as pairs, have them have a conversation between their characters. One person will be the hero, one person can be the villain, or they can both be heroes looking for the villain. It's totally up to them. The conversations that they're going to come up with, some of them will struggle and will need a little bit of extra help, but most of the time I find, because they're very familiar with how how comic heroes work, they will be able to come up with their conversations very easily. For example, if you have a stormtrooper talking to a unicorn, it is a hilarious conversation, I assure you. And then I usually show them a few comics, so here's a few of my favorites. Daniel X. So this is Daniel X. It's actually based on a set of novels by James Patterson. And all of the captions actually have what the character is thinking. So it's a great way to be able to talk to kids about what's the difference between speech bubbles and captions. And with speech bubbles, I always say to them that the speech bubbles are there to not only show what the character is saying, but also to show what the character is feeling. So we talked a little bit about the different shapes that the speech bubbles can be and what that actually might mean. And as I said, they're all so familiar with comics. It's really great. They really get into it. They really know. But it makes them think a little bit more about their character and what they're going to be saying and feeling. And then when I go into plotting, I'll stay there. When I go into plotting, I never go more than 5 kids. If you go 3 kids, you're always going to have 2 that work well together and 1 that's excluded. If you go more than 3, if you go 4 or 5, they usually work pretty well together. Even still, I always made one person what I call the group leader, and they're the person who's responsible for stopping any arguments. Because a lot of the times, one kid will decide, here's how everything's going to go, and they will plot out everything, and that's the story. And if they're a really strong personality, then the other ones who are a little bit less strong might not might not want to speak up about it. So if you appoint one person as a leader, don't appoint the one who looks like they're going to take over. But if you appoint somebody a leader and make sure that they know that their goal is to make sure that everybody has a say in how the story goes, then usually I find that it works pretty well. I also show them how comics are written, because comics aren't written where somebody sits down and just starts drawing pictures. There are very often a writer and an illustrator, which are 2 different people. The writer doesn't always know how to draw. The writer very often has no idea how to draw a picture, and what they're doing is they're just describing what everything is panel by panel. So this example, I actually took a comic that I really liked, and I did the description as an example for the kids. You can find examples of comic scripts online. If you go to Dark Horse, for example, they actually have a sample comic that you can download that's just a script to show, because they get so many writers saying, I want to write a comic book, but they have no idea how to do it. They have samples of how to do it, and you can use that to show kids. A lot of the Neil Gaiman books also have the graphic novel written out, but if you've ever read the Sandman books, for example, I don't know that you would want to be doing that with grades 4 to 6. So be very careful that the comic that you're using is appropriate to the grade level. And then I have them storyboard. So the handout that I gave you with the panels, I don't use that for the kids to make the comic and then stop there. I have them just scribble how they want the comic to go. So that way they have the written out script, and then they have this little drawing, and they get a really good idea of how a comic book is actually created, of the artistry, but also in the sense of the storytelling and the writing and how much they need to think about it. And then this is a finished version of using Comic Life, which I'm going to show you a couple other things first. But this particular student who did this, he used drawings as the characters. But what I want to show you is, and okay, I'll show you this first. So Murder on the Orient Express, this is a good comic to show them because it shows them pacing. With pacing with comics, the more panels that you have, the faster the pacing. So this is meant to, when you read it, to create the illusion that something very exciting is happening, and it's a very quick paced scene. So this is usually what I read to them. Tell many panels, boxes means the reader is swept away quickly. Dialogue is faster as the boxes are smaller. The cliffhanger at the end of the page is a picture, not words. And then it makes them look at all of those things and really think about it, so that when they're creating those, if they want a fast-paced comic, they know they have to have more panels. If you have fewer panels, that's how you slow pacing in comics. If you want to slow the pacing, if you want to slow down the story, if you want to have a really big moment, then you don't have a whole bunch of panels. You have one panel, you have 2 panels, and that's it. This is from the graphic novel Stormbreaker, and it's a fantastic scene. And also, this was a series of books, as you probably all know. So again, fewer panels, slows down the reading, and at the end, it's a cliffhanger, and it's just pictures. There's no words. So I usually start off by doing a sample comic with them on the board, and I will write down panel 1, and then I say, who wants to tell me what happens? I'll say, where does this take place? And they'll raise their hand. And in this particular one, and this is one that actually I did at Vancouver Public Library for the book camp this past summer, and they decided that it was going to be the exterior woods. There's a group of soldiers that were escorting a prisoner, and then one kid said, the soldiers are futuristic. So it turned out that they were futuristic, and the woods were futuristic because the trees suddenly became metal, and everything started changing as everybody, added to the graphic novel. And then we just did 2 panels as an example for this. By the time we were finished, anybody who couldn't figure out what else, when they were doing their graphic novel, if they couldn't figure out what to do, they were able to actually use this as their template. And I would say, well, it's okay for you to do this if this works for you. So it gives the kids who are struggling with ideas some ideas to work on. So basically, for writing it down, just to reiterate myself, panel 1, describe what the scene looks like. You can do that in point form or paragraph. Description can only be what is seen. So a lot of times they'll start writing, they'll say, in the drawer they had, and you have to stop them and say, you can't see that in a picture. And it really makes them think about what a comic book is. And then also that there can only be one action per character per scene. And that, again, makes them realize, because what I usually do is I let them write it out, and then I'll show them that in this one panel, you have this character doing 4 different things. That has to be 4 panels. That can't just be one panel. And then, again, and so here's an example. This is actually what I showed you on the board that we did together, just in case you couldn't see it. And then again, on the right-hand side is a script, and this is actually a script that one of my students did, and then I usually print that out and I give them that as a sample, so then everybody has a sample that they can look at. And then, instead of having them do a script like this, if they're grades 4 to 6, this is great to do if they're teenagers, but if they're grades 4 to 6, it's actually better to have them writing what's going to happen in the panels with panels. So again, this is one of the handouts that I gave you, having them write down what's going to happen in each box. And then if you have a group of 5, then you can actually have them, if they're really not getting along and the leader isn't working, you can say 1 person per panel. And then that person decides what happens in that panel. And those sometimes wind up being the best comics. So this is the green screen, and what you can do with this particular program is, if you have, and again, unfortunately, I can't show you pictures of the kids doing it, but if you have a big screen and it's all one color, you could even just use this wall, and that would work out just as well. And you have the kids dress up and pose in a position of some sort of a comic book pose, and then take a picture and then import that picture into the computer, into Comic Life. Comic Life has this really great thing called Instant Alpha. And Instant Alpha is something that will find one color that you choose, and it will get rid of it. And whatever background you put into that picture, it will basically cover the green. So just to show you, the Instant Alpha starts to turn all the green red, and then if I was to put a background in here, wherever you see red, that background would show. So you could take the people and put them anywhere you want. So if you want them to be flying somewhere, you can take a picture of them like this, and then you just take away the background, put in sky into the background, and suddenly it looks like they're flying. And it winds up being a pretty cool program. So this is a comic that myself and some of my friends made as a sample. And this is a comic that my students made. And this particular one, we had access to the outdoors, so we used a lot of the outdoors for this one. They wrote this one themselves. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but to be honest, at this point they're having fun and it's a really great program, so if the comic itself doesn't make sense to me, who cares? It made sense to them, and they loved it. So, and it probably took 20 minutes to show them how Comic Life worked, but once you show them how it works, they have no problem with it. And so all I had to do was spend that 20 minutes showing them what to do, and then they took to it easily. And they took all their own pictures, they imported all their pictures into the computer, they did all the instant alpha, and they plugged it into the program itself. And that's the program that I wanted to show you, just in case you're looking for something to do this summer.